So you are starting your teacher business and you're wondering, what do I say online and how do I show up confidently and how do I get people to join my circle or to show interest in me? Well, that's what we're going to be diving into this week's content. So with that being said, let's dive in.
Hey Teacher Bestie, my name's Helena and I'm the creator of the Present Teacher Podcast. I'm a first year teacher coach, and in this podcast you are going to learn everything from simple, actionable classroom management, social emotional learning, and teacher wellness strategies. You know that impact you want to make in the classroom? Well, we're going to make it happen here.
So welcome to part 3 of the Starting Your Teacher Business series. In part 1, we talked about who you want to help, who do you want your business to be about, who are you excited to help, who are you looking forward to helping in a way that feels effortless and easy and almost like you're cheating because you are so excited and so grateful that you get to be paid for helping out these people. The second part that we talked about was how you want to help them. We talked about the differences between selling resources on TPT all the way to coaching and even selling online courses. Well, here in part 3, we're going to be talking about how to help them and what to say online to attract people into your world. So with that being said, let's dive into what to say online in your teacher business. So before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about my story. When I first started my online teaching business, I was super nervous about showing up and saying the wrong thing, having people judge me. So I ended up buying templates from other teacher business creators. How these would work is I would just plug in my info and I would use these email templates and edit a couple things. And while that did work at first, what I found was it wasn't really me and it didn't feel that aligned. And I kind of felt like my message was watered down. And it wasn't until I shared with my heart and what I authentically was excited to say, the more people started to tune in and join in and get something impactful from what I had to say. So with that being said, you might be wondering, what do I say online? And the truth is, say whatever you want. The reality is you have experienced your life and your life has been completely different than anyone else. And the way you see the world is going to be completely different from everyone else. So that's why it's so important to share your strategies, your tips, your experiences, because the reality is someone can take something powerful from the message you have to say. And when you use things like templates or just water down your message so that everyone will like it, the reality is you're missing a lot of that potent energy behind it. And it's probably not going to be as impactful and it's not going to be as fulfilling either. When I was writing blog posts, emails, all of that, and I was batching them out, and I would sit there for a couple days straight and just use these templates. I wasn't very motivated or excited to share my word. I was just doing it because I was told I had to share a certain amount of posts, a certain amount of content a week, so such and such forth. And I wasn't excited by it. I wasn't moved by it. When you're moved by your message, so will other people be. So when there's something that I'm just pouring my heart on, I'm just being passionate about it, oftentimes other people are going to relate to it. Whereas if I read, words from a script or just say what everyone else is saying, I'm going to blend in and it's not going to feel authentic and it's not going to build as strong as relationships with the people that I want in my community. So that's the first thing. So the first tip I have for you on what should you say online is, what are you passionate about? If no one could get mad at you, if you couldn't, be judged, if you couldn't get in trouble, what would you get on the online world and say? Would you say that being like in my example, something that was common was your new teachers, you're going to struggle the first 5 years and it's going to, be a bummer and it's gonna suck, but you're gonna have to deal with it and do more self-care. I didn't believe that. I leaned into, you know what? It doesn't have to be a struggle those first couple of years. Here's how we can make it so it's easier those first couple of years of teaching and to the point where you love your job and it's rewarding and you have time to dedicate to more things like creating a business. So what are you passionate about? If no one could get mad at you, if you couldn't mess it up, if you couldn't get in trouble, what would you say? What's on your heart? Now, with that, you might find that, well, that's great, but I don't have something to say every day. And while, yes, that's true, what I find is when I give myself permission to create content when I want to, I find that I will naturally want to more often. So, a great example of this is, like I said, when I used to batch out content in a way where I felt very constricted, I had to talk about this and this way and sound like this way because everyone was going to perceive me well this way. I felt really compartmentalized, very restrained, constrained in my words and my message, and I wasn't motivated to share what I wanted. Whereas when I gave myself permission, you know what? You don't have to record YouTube videos, you don't have to share things until you feel excited to do so. I found that when I took care of myself and I asked myself, what do you want to do today? I naturally found myself motivated and inspired to share my word and share what I wanted to say online naturally. So, if no one could get mad at you, if you couldn't get in trouble, what would you say? I have been told time and time again that people love my brand here on The Present Teacher, and the secret to that is I'm just being myself. The way you see me show up right now is exactly how you would see me on a one-on-one coaching call, how you would see me as a teacher. I'm just being me and I'm just sharing what's on my heart. And when you're being authentically real like that, people can relate to that. They connect to that. And then when you tell people what's on your heart and you don't hold back, that's when you really get deep. That's when you really build those connections. So don't be afraid to just get up and share out your heart. When I first started, there was nobody liking my posts. There was nobody watching my YouTube videos. There was nobody listening to my podcast. But the more I did it and the more I shared my heart, the more and more people started to listen and tune in, and the more and more people who were impacted by what I had to say. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Say what you have to say and do it consistently, even when no one is listening. And something important about this is at some point, I stopped posting for other people and I started posting for me. And what I mean by this is I was trying to create content so that other people would like me. I was trying to create content so that other people would find interest in my free resources. But at some point, I decided when it was such a constricting way to go about my business, and I realized that the way I had been coached by other business coaches or teacher business coaches wasn't feeling aligned with me, I decided to just share content for me. Oftentimes, the lessons that I'm sharing here online are the lessons I'm learning in my personal life, and I'm actually most of the time writing to me or I'm reflecting back to when I was struggling with this and I'm writing a letter to me back then and people relate to that. They resonate with that because I'm being authentic. I'm not watering down my message based on what everybody else wants to hear. I'm just saying the truth and my truth, and I love myself for that. And I think it's powerful. And so if no one could get mad at you, what would you say? And be authentically yourself. The more you feel comfortable sharing online, the more people are going to relate to you. The only difference between the first video I posted or the first podcast episode I've posted and the ones now is back then I used to script everything because I was terrified of how people would react. And now I barely have an outline. I just share what's on my heart and people resonate with that. So, do the practice. It's gonna take a couple times to practice, but the more you practice sharing from your heart in an authentic place, the more people are gonna resonate it and the easier it's going to be to the point where you forget that you used to struggle with this. And I know, so with that being said, I know that there's going to be a lot of limiting beliefs that come up when you think of authentically just sharing what you have to say online. So, with that being said, what's coming up for you that makes you scared? I want you to ask yourself, what's coming up for you that makes you feel scared to show up online? Because the reality is, we're all scared. When I first started, I was terrified. My first summit, I was literally shaking when I had to present. We're all scared. But the difference between the teacher business owner who's done this for 10 years versus the one that's on day one is the one who's done it for 10 years has faced those fears and asked them, how can I see things differently? How can I let this fear go? What limiting beliefs am I telling myself? What stories am I telling myself? And how can I shift it? So, a good example of this was when I first started sharing my story online. I realized I was scared to share what I had to say online because of a story that happened way back when, and oftentimes that's the case of why these fears are here. I started to ask myself, okay, I'm having a hard time sharing my heart online and just being authentically me. So, what story in my past taught me that I needed to filter myself to be accepted by others? And what I quickly realized was when I was growing up, I was naturally inclined to be easy. School came easy for me, essentially. And so when I was little in elementary school, I would often raise my hands to answer questions, my hand to answer questions. And the more I did it, the more other kids started to tease me about it a little bit. They used to call me a know-it-all and all these other things. And so I learned from a young age to not share out answers and not to call out. And I started to develop this shy personality because in order to be accepted by my peers, I learned that I had to be silent and not heard. And that was coming up and reflecting and projecting into this business world that I was stepping into. I felt terrified to share out my answers and my thoughts on things because as a little girl, I didn't feel safe doing so. So I had to really look at that belief, forgive my past self, my child self, accept it, and decide that I'm going to let this go. And remind myself that it is safe to show up online. It is safe for me to be seen. It is okay for me to share my opinions on things, that I do not have to be the expert on everything to share online. I just have to share my opinion and be authentic. And hopefully, people will get something from that and they could take it as their own and make it into something else. So, taking the time to look at that belief in the face and shift it and let it go completely has helped me so much, especially in the last year, really show up as myself and not be afraid of what others are thinking of me. Another thing that might come up for you is maybe you're scared people will judge you, or maybe that your coworkers will find your online presence. So, the truth is, I had this limiting belief as well. And the more I did it, the more I shared online, the more I recorded YouTube videos and podcasts, the more I recorded reels and TikTok videos and social media, the more I did it, the more I got used to it and the easier it became. And it wasn't something that I dreaded anymore or feared anymore because I had shown myself that it was safe to do so. So, and then you kind of just make this decision that I will not be afraid of this anymore, and it becomes easier and easier as you go. And another thing you can do to kind of overcome this fear is think to yourself, what is future me going to be like? I could project myself into 5 years from now, what does future Helena look like? Is she shy and timid, or is she confident and helping teachers online and not afraid to stand out and speak up for what she believes in? And the reality is, future Helena has thanked that her coworkers have found me because maybe they needed some of the resources I had, or maybe they could start a conversation at work about something that they listened to, and then that created a really great dialect when we were at work. But To be honest, this is exactly what happened. I was terrified to tell anybody at my district or at my school about my business, but the more I did it, the easier it became. And it got to the point where other people were finding me, and it didn't really bother me, I found, because the truth was, the worst that's going to happen is they're not going to like my stuff and they're not going to follow, or the best case scenario, they find something they like, they talk to me about it, and maybe I can even help them. And in fact, that's actually how I got a good amount of my first coaching clients. But the point is, it's okay to be scared. When I found that I was scared of something, and it's important not to judge yourself for it, not to think less of yourself for having fears, but to thank yourself for, oh, this is a mental roadblock that I'm having. Let's overcome this. This was something that I kind of explained a little further in the winter break reset that I just hosted. But essentially, mental roadblocks and limiting beliefs are a lot like traffic. Pretend you're driving in the car and suddenly you're stuck in traffic, and limiting beliefs are those traffic. They're the things stopping you from getting from point A to point B. So instead of going from home to school or from school to home, instead of it taking you 20 minutes because of all these limiting beliefs, now it's taking you hour to 2 hours. Whereas, let's say you have a GPS system or these things that you notice, hey, I have a limiting belief coming up. I'm going to go around this and avoid that traffic. That's what working on those limiting beliefs are. They're a GPS system to say, hey, I recognize that traffic's up ahead. Let's ping this limiting belief and rework it in a way that benefits me. That way it doesn't stop me from getting from point A to point B faster. It doesn't stop you completely, although sometimes it doesn't stop you completely, but it might make the process slower. It might make take longer. So the reality is looking at your limiting beliefs. So that wraps up what you should say when you are coming up online. Your homework for this week's content is, if no one could judge you or get mad at you, what would you show up and say online? What would you share on the world, share the world with the world? What would you share from your heart? If you couldn't get in trouble, you couldn't get judged, what would you say? Take, a pen and a paper if you're a paper person like me, or maybe just a blank document, and just start jotting down and pouring out your heart and just start talking about what you're passionate about, what you're excited about, and what is driving you to want to help those teachers or those people that you want to help. And then the second thing I want you to think about is, or the second question I want you to think about is, what's stopping you from sharing your story or sharing online? Is it you're scared of being judged? A limiting story from your childhood? Is it you're scared of other people finding you? What is stopping you from sharing online? And then after you answer that question, go to question 3, which is, in 5 years from now, what does future you look and act like? Is she worried about her friends finding her online, or is she excited? Is she not bothered by that because she has bigger problems to worry about, or just other things and other priorities in life? Are they still scared of what you just mentioned? And answer number 2, and what does life look like now? What would you have to change personality wise? What would you have to encompass right now to be that person now? And that's really going to help you realize that these fears that I have are just a small snapshot of my life now, and they have no impact on where I'm going 5, 10 years from now. And in 5, 10 years from now, I'm going to forget that I even worried about things like this because they're going to be such a minute problem in the long run. So that wraps up what you should say when you get online. If you want to dive deeper into what business tips, how to start your first teacher biz, I highly recommend you check out the Ultimate Teacher Business Guide, where I answer the top 10 questions I get in regards to starting your very own teacher business. So, with that being said, make sure to tune in, subscribe wherever you're tuning in from for week 4, where I dive deeper into how to start your very first teacher business. As always, remember, we are stronger together, and I will see you in the next one, Teacher Bestie. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I hope that you were able to take away some value that will help you thrive inside and out of the classroom. It would mean the world to me if you could take 5 seconds right now and leave a review on this podcast. And if you found this podcast especially helpful, make sure to take a screenshot of this episode right now and tag me on your socials to let me know you're listening. As always, remember that we are stronger together with all the love in the world. Helena, aka the President Teacher. See you next time, Teacher Bestie.